All right, guys. So last week, former Fox News host Tucker Carlson sat down with former President Donald Trump for an interview. The two did a pre-recorded interview that aired at the same time as the Republican presidential primary GOP debate last week. They ran at the same time. Obviously, it's a big middle finger toward Fox News. Now, the debate that aired on Fox, I think it got almost 12 million views, which sounds like a lot, but it's still about half the number of views they got the year prior. So just by comparison, Tucker Carlson's interview with President Trump got over 220 million views. Some people have disputed that number, saying that the number simply reflects the number of times the post was actually seen, not the number of people who watched any length of the video that would be long enough to constitute watching the entire thing. Who knows? It's not for me to worry about at this point. But it was interesting. And the video is still up on Twitter. Now the social media platform is called X, if you guys haven't checked it out yet. But there were a couple things on there that I found interesting. I mean, there wasn't a lot of new information, of course. Why would there be? The president can't talk about, or excuse me, the former president can't talk about a lot of the things that are happening with his trials right now. He has a bit of a gag order on him with his 91 counts of things that he's facing, along with 18 of his associates in the case of Fani Willis's Georgia RICO case. Additionally, the guy's already served president for 4 years, so we know what he's about. We know what he's going to do. We know what his policy priorities are. He's already made some statements about what he plans to do in the second term. There wasn't a lot of new information to be had, but Tucker did ask some interesting questions, as he always does. And one of those has to do with election integrity. And it's a question that I haven't heard. I've raised the question myself online and received a lot of pushback. I had also seen Ben Shapiro raise this question, but not really anybody else in the right-leaning conservative space. So I'm going to go ahead and play this video real quick. I wasn't able to play it from the internet, but I do have it saved. So I want to play this and let you guys check this out. And then we're going to have a little bit of a conversation about exactly what was said here, because I thought it was pretty interesting that Tucker asked this. And let me go ahead and just jump in. I'll play this clip for you, and then we'll jump in and kind of talk about it here.
Vice president to do it. So I said, so you're saying I was right. The vice president did have the right to do it, and they said, yes, he did.
So if you're saying they stole it from you last time, why wouldn't they do the same this time?
Oh, well, they'll try. They're going to be trying, yeah. And not only me, Look, DeSantis is out. I think he's gone. So he was at a level. People have figured him out. He's gone. But if somebody else got in, other than me, they'll go at him just as viciously as they did me. These people are sick.
Okay, so Trump clearly dodged that question. So just to recap, the question that Tucker asked Trump was, if they stole the election from you last time, why won't they steal it from you next time? And it's a question that nobody on the right seems to have any interest in providing an actual answer on, because it makes sense. I mean, we're saying that the election was stolen. There's people whose entire platforms are based on talking about election integrity and the fact that they believe the 2020 election was stolen. But the same people are turning around and saying, hey, vote for my guy in 2024. Just vote harder. Everything's going to be fine. Without painting a picture of what's changed or what's going to be different this time around. It's completely incoherent reasoning. It makes absolutely no sense. If you're saying our elections are catastrophically corrupt, and you haven't outlined anything that's changed, you're essentially telling people to stay home and not vote at all. It's voter suppression. You're engaging in voter suppression on your own side. I don't understand how conservatives and Republicans don't see this. I mean, this seems like elementary level stuff, right? You have to explain to people what's going to be different. Why is your guy going to get in next time? You just told me how bad the system is, right? And I would also think, too, that if this issue is the constitutional crisis and threat to our democracy that we're told it is, and it really is, right? If election fraud is taking place, which it looks like it is, we don't know for sure, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, because no judge has the balls to actually hear the case and allow it to be heard in court, so we can't get a definitive ruling. But there's enough information out there to suggest that we got some problems that we need to work through, right? But again, if this is a core part of your identity, then the vast majority of your time, I would think, would be shedding light on how to fix the problem. We should be hearing about how to register voters. We should be hearing about how to ballot harvest and where to get information on that in your state so we can start to compete. We should be hearing about how to pressure legislatures, state legislators in your state to enact policies that are going to help shore up our elections so that these types of things don't happen in the future. And it calls into question the degree to which people actually believe this stuff, because many of the people who scream about election fraud do none of those things. They have zero interest in telling you how to fix it, zero interest on updating you on what's changed and how you can get involved in what we need to do to help bring about fair elections. They just punt to everybody else. So I want to encourage you with a couple pieces of information here. Now, I did talk with Hans von Spakovsky over at the Heritage Foundation not too long ago, and there's something I didn't know. So I'm guessing a lot of other people didn't know as well, because I am in the news every single day to a pretty strong degree, mostly because it's my job. But if I didn't know about this, I'm guessing a lot of other people didn't either. Heritage Foundation since 2021 has been building out an election integrity scorecard. Now, what this does is this tracks all of the legislation and policy that have been put in place since the 2020 election and ranks states based on how good they're doing with the laws they're passing to help shore up our elections. So this is something that's very positive. I will put a link to this site in the description so that you guys have access to it without having to do a bunch of searches and digging through stuff. I know people are busy. You're raising kids. You're working jobs. You got other stuff to do other than sit around and trying to figure out how to get to a random piece of data I'm talking about. So I'll make it real easy for you. But go check it out when you get a free moment, right? Now, this scorecard works. I mean, it's pretty cool how they have it set up. And this is something that is constantly updated, right? So each state in the U.S. has both a score and a rank. Now, the score reflects changes that have been implemented to their election laws since the 2020 election. The rank compares the states to other states that have also made changes. Now, you can see, just so you know, so they're considering a lot of different things here in terms of how they're rating these states on efforts to secure their elections and prevent something from 2020 prevent something like that from happening again. They're looking at voter ID implementation. They're looking at states purging ineligible names off their voter list, the accuracy of voter registration list. So no dead people, no ineligible people on your voter rolls. They're looking at absentee ballot management. They're looking at ballot harvesting and tracking restrictions that are in place. They're looking at access of election observers, verification of citizenship. They're looking at identification for voter assistance, vote counting practices. I'm assuming that includes poll watchers as well. They're also considering election litigation procedures, like how easy is it for you to be able to legally contest elections? I mean, we saw at the 2022 election with Kari Lake that there were a lot of questions about what actually went down. And we have dozens and dozens of people giving sworn statements, signing sworn affidavits under penalty of perjury that numerous votes were counted toward the final vote tally that were in violation of state law because they broke chain of custody rules. In one case, as many as 297,000 ballots may have been counted illegally. In another case that went to court, there were tens of thousands of ballots, but ballots that were questionable, that were greater than the margin of victory that Governor Katie Hobbs supposedly had over Kari Lake. An update on that I just saw earlier today. One of those cases with Kari Lake, and thank God she's somebody who's actually fighting for election integrity, whatever you do or don't think about her. She's fighting a good fight on this topic, and she's doing the work, trying to get some sort of resolution on these issues and shed some light on this stuff, because we need this to go through the process that we have to settle disputes, which is our judicial system. And she has a trial, I believe, in the beginning of September, beginning or end of September. It's a 2 or 3 day trial that we can actually maybe start to get some answers on what actually went down and consider some of this evidence and weigh it. But that's something that the Heritage Foundation is considering as well. They're also looking at restrictions on same-day registration, so you can't just pop in and say, hey, I'm so-and-so, give me a ballot, and have it count. They're looking at restrictions of automatic registrations and also restrictions of private funding of election officials or government agencies. So that would be like the Zuckerbucks type stuff that helped influence the last election. So there are people out there doing the work to try to bring about positive change, but I want you guys to keep this in mind as we talk about what's happening in 2024 and the likelihood that it will or won't be stolen. I mean, you can see Tennessee ranks number 1 on election integrity. Georgia, a state that had a lot of problems back in 2020. I'm not going to relitigate that stuff. It's getting ready to get litigated in court next year with this Fannie Willis RICO case and the 91 pages of BS. But Georgia has instituted a number of policies since 2020 to help secure their elections. So that's a state that's made some improvements. You're not hearing a lot about it. You're hearing a lot of fear-mongering from people, but nobody's telling you what's actually changed. So check this list out. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I'll put the link in the description so you can peruse this at your own leisure. But do understand that, we've got to start having better conversations, because the last thing you want to do is encourage people to not vote when we have an election of critical importance like we're going to have next year. I know everybody says year in and year out, like, oh, this election is the most important election of our lifetime. We say that every single election cycle. For some reason, it feels like this one might actually be, it might actually hold up for this. But you don't want it to discourage people from coming to the polls. There's more at stake than the presidential election. We're talking about down ballot races. We're talking about gubernatorial races. We're talking about races for judge. We're talking about Congress, Senate, House, State Assembly, depending on what state you're in. We're talking about school boards. There are thousands and thousands of school board elections that are up this year that nobody's talking about, right? The government closest to the people has the most influence over you and the most power. You are going to be discouraging people from participating in those elections if you convince them that their vote does not matter. So I would just, again, encourage you all to start having better conversations on this topic. And we still have time to actually impact the security of next year's election. One of the things I discussed with Hans about, and I put this in an article that I wrote over at timcast.com. I'll link that in the description as well. But the title is "The 2024 Election Will Be More Secure Than 2020 Analysts Say." I asked him if he thought the election would be more secure, and he blatantly said yes. There are a number of things in place that have made things considerably better than things that we saw in 2020. So don't be too discouraged. But the other thing that he told me as we were talking was that there is still time. There is still time to reach out to state legislatures, depending on what state you're in, and get new laws on the books that will help shore up next year's election. I believe we have until just January or February at the latest. But there's still a small window in certain states where more can be done to help make next year's election as safe as possible. What I would encourage each of you to do is get involved in some kind of way. I know we don't want to hear that. Again, as I said earlier, we're all busy with certain things, right? But if this is the critical issue that it is, we don't have a choice, man. That's what civic duty is. It's not a spectator sport. It requires involvement. So make the phone calls, make the emails. It's not hard to find who represents you. Get online, look up who's your representative for your state, what the phone number is, what the email address is. If you're close by, what the address is. Show up. Send the email. Make the phone calls. This is your civic duty. This is what you can do. People always say, well, what am I supposed to do about it? This is what you can do. This is what we're obligated to do. This is our responsibility. We can't just outsource all of this stuff to people who, I mean, a lot of times they're not responsive, but they're not responsive because they don't hear from you. So why would they answer to you? The politicians don't fear the people because the people aren't engaged. They're not involved. They're not doing anything. They're sitting around on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. We're posting, we're making memes, but we're not civically active. I had a conversation with somebody about this last week, and I said, if we took away your social media, what would your activism be? They were like, whoa, that's a powerful question. It's just something that was on my mind, and I think it's important as we head into this cycle. And as we're talking about taking action to solve a lot of the challenges that we face as a nation, if you didn't have access to your social media, where would your voice be? What impact would you have on making the change that you say you want to see in the world? Would anybody with any power, any legislator, any activist, even any commentator, would anybody know your thoughts on any issue at all? If you didn't have Facebook, you didn't have Twitter, you didn't have TikTok, you didn't have Instagram, you didn't have True Social, what would your activism be? Are you going to any meetings? Are you involved in your political party? Are you door knocking? Are you making calls to help support your favorite candidates? Are you fundraising? Are you doing anything at all that doesn't involve talking on social media? Because if you're not, You're part of the problem. I hate to break it to you. That's just the way it is. So, again, I made this video to give you a little hope. So hopefully you're at least a little bit inspired. And know that all is not lost. Of course, they're going to try to rig the election. Obviously, that's a little different than outright stealing the election. You know, rigging is what we saw in 2020 with the Hunter Biden laptop story, how they shut down the New York Post account for publishing the what we now know to be true information, which what we knew then to be true information in terms of all the data on the Hunter Biden laptop being completely true. We had the 51 former intelligence officers sign that garbage letter stating that it was Russian disinformation. We now know that was a lie. We also have social media platforms and search engines like Google who are influencing your ability to cast ballots for your choice for candidate because you're not as informed as you should be. There was a testimony from Robert Epstein a couple of years ago. I'm sure some of you remember this. I think it was 2018. Testified before Congress, and he's also written op-eds and things about this, about how just through search engine results alone, manipulating search engine results, Google is able to shift more than 10 million votes in a single election just by changing the algorithm to switch up what you see when you do a search. So there are lots of ways they're going to try to rig it and obviously get the outcome that they want, but understand that there's 330 million people in this country, and when people band together, there's a lot of power. So I don't know, man. If there's anything you think I missed or that I should consider, feel free to shoot it over to me. Leave some comments in the comments section. Let me know what you think. Other than that, check the description. I will put links to both of those stories in there. And other than that, I wish you all the best. God bless, and I will get at y'all soon.